You know that feeling when you're leaning back in a chair and you push it just like a millimeter too far?
Oh, yeah. That terrifying moment of total weightlessness.
Right. For a split second, you're just suspended there. You're past the point of balance, but you haven't actually hit the floor yet.
Exactly. And we always like to think we can just shift our weight and fix it, right?
Yeah.
But gravity has already taken over.
Yeah, the underlying physics of your situation have fundamentally changed. And today, for you, our listener, we're looking at the math that proves humanity is suspended in that exact midair moment.
We really are.
Because over 2/3 of the global population is now living in a state of population collapse at the exact same moment that our planet's ocean currents are, well, they're threatening to literally stall out.
Yeah, and we are attempting to navigate these massive structural collapses by, rapidly handing over military and biological controls to autonomous AI systems. We are leaning back in the chair across 4 completely different dimensions.
We're hitting 4 invisible walls at the exact same time. And we have a really fascinating stack of research to guide us through this today. We're pulling from a massive McKinsey report, the Global Challenges Foundation, the Nordic Council, and a really interesting Cambridge University initiative.
It's a heavy stack of reading, for sure.
It is, yeah. But our mission for this deep dive is to unpack these tipping points. We are examining our physical planet, our human population, our autonomous technologies, and our biology.
Right, and the goal here isn't just to list off a bunch of scary statistics. We want to understand the actual mechanics of why we are moving out of a stable past and into completely uncharted territory.
Exactly. How do all these forces collide to shape our future security and society?
Well, to really understand these shifts, we have to start by grounding the conversation in the physical world. I mean, before we can talk about human economies or technology, we had to look at the baseline stability of the Earth itself.
Right, the actual ground we're standing on.
Yeah. For roughly the last 12,000 years, which is an epoch known as the Holocene, humanity has thrived. And we've thrived because the Earth's climate has been remarkably stable.
But the research makes it clear we are definitively out of the Holocene now.
Oh, absolutely. We are deep into the Anthropocene, which is an epoch defined entirely by human impact.
And the reports lay out this framework of 9 planetary boundaries. They're basically the safe operating limits for the Earth system. And we have now breached 7 of those 9.
7 out of 9, with ocean acidification being the most recent limit we've crossed.
Wow. Which brings us to this massive immediate concern from the Nordic Council report, right? The Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, the AMOC.
The AMOC, yeah.
Yeah.
It is a massive system of ocean currents that transports warm water from the tropics all the way up to the North Atlantic.
It's basically what keeps Northern Europe's climate relatively mild, right?
Exactly. But due to global warming, this entire circulation is slowing down.
Okay, wait, I need to pause here because if the AMOC is just a massive system of ocean water moving around, why does it collapsing mean we can't just, fix it when the Earth eventually cools back down? I mean, water is water. Once the air is cooler, shouldn't it just flow again?
And that is the trap. The AMOC isn't just water moving in a circle, it's a density engine.
A density engine?
Yeah, it's driven by a very specific balance of temperature and salt. So when warm water travels north, some of it evaporates, which leaves the remaining water saltier.
Right, the salt doesn't evaporate.
Exactly. And saltier, colder water is incredibly dense, so it physically sinks to the ocean floor. And that sinking action physically pulls more warm water up behind it. It's a massive mechanical pump.
Okay, I see. So it's actively pulling the water across the globe.
But when global warming melts the Greenland ice sheet, it dumps billions of gallons of fresh water into the North Atlantic.
Oh, and fresh water is less dense.
Exactly. It dilutes the salt, so the water doesn't sink anymore. And without that sinking action, the whole pump physically breaks down. And if that mechanism stops, cooling the air back down 50 years later doesn't just magically restart the engine. You fundamentally altered the physics of the ocean.
I like to think of it like the Earth's HVAC system breaking down. Basically, the thermostat is totally busted, and the Nordic report highlights a massive paradox here.
It's a huge paradox, yeah.
If this pump collapses, Northern Europe could experience a severe, sudden cooling effect. So it's like One room in the house in Northern Europe is freezing, which destroys their food production and energy systems, while the rest of the house is actively on fire.
It is entirely counterintuitive to the average person.
Yeah.
You have a warming planet triggering a regional deep freeze.
Which is wild. And this is why if staying under 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming is the goal, how does the concept of a temporary overshoot change our safety net? Like, if we go over, but plan to come back down.
It changes everything because an overshoot is incredibly dangerous. You can't unmelt the glacier, and you can't easily restart a stalled ocean pump. We have to govern the coming decades as a period of managed planetary recovery. We have to treat the Earth as a highly interconnected biophysical foundation.
So the physical structure of the Earth is warping. But this climate shift leads to an obvious question for you and me. Who is actually going to deal with this? Because the structure of the human population is undergoing a massive, unprecedented inversion at the exact same time.
Right, the demographic tipping point.
Yeah.
For all of modern history, the human population has been shaped like a pyramid. You had a very wide base of young people supporting a narrower top of older people, but falling fertility rates and increasing longevity are turning those pyramids into obelisks.
Obelisks. They're becoming straight up and down.
Exactly.
I think obelisk is almost too generous, honestly. It's more like building a skyscraper where the top floors weigh twice as much as the foundation. The structural load eventually just cracks the concrete.
That's a great analogy.
Because the McKinsey report scale of this youth scarcity is just wild. 2/3 of humanity now lives in countries with a fertility rate below 2.1, which is the baseline replacement level needed just to keep a population stable.
It fundamentally breaks the economic calculus we've relied on for decades. We measure this load through what's called the support ratio, which is the number of working-age people available to support one older person.
Right.
In 1997, the global support ratio was 9.4. So over 9 workers for every senior. By 2050, it is projected to drop to 3.9.
Less than 4. We're talking about going from over 9 workers down to fewer than 4. What does that actually look like for a society on a day-to-day basis?
It looked like a completely hollowed-out economy. Think about the senior gap. Older individuals naturally consume more than they earn from active labor. They need healthcare, housing, pensions.
Right. They aren't working, but they are still buying groceries and going to the doctor.
Exactly. In the U.S. today, the gap between what a person over 65 consumes and what they earn is roughly $60,000. That gap has to be funded by savings or, mostly by public transfers like taxes on the working age.
And if you only have 3 or 4 workers shouldering that $60,000 burden instead of 9, the math gets brutal really fast.
The reports highlight countries like Spain, where the per capita government deficit is projected to multiply 4.5 times by 2050, simply due to this demographic drag.
4.5 times.
Yeah, and healthcare spending surges. China is looking at a 29% per capita increase, while spending on education, infrastructure, and innovation just plummets.
Which brings up the most obvious question, right? If the problem is a lack of young workers, can't governments just, encourage people to have more kids? Fix the base of the skyscraper.
I mean, many governments are trying. They're pouring billions into childcare subsidies and tax incentives, but there's a mathematical reality we just cannot escape. Even if global birth rates miraculously spiked back above replacement level tomorrow morning, it takes 20 years for those babies to grow up, finish school, and become productive economic contributors.
Right. A baby born today isn't going to be paying taxes next year.
Exactly. It doesn't solve the immediate bottleneck.
So you have a rapidly shrinking pool of young workers, but a society that demands the exact same or even higher level of productivity just to keep the lights on and care for the elderly. So with the support ratio dropping, the workers we have left are basically running on an economic treadmill that keeps speeding up. We have to rely on insane productivity growth just to maintain the status quo.
And this creates intense pressure, especially for what the reports call later wave regions, like Sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America.
Okay, how so?
Well, they have a temporary window right now, known as a demographic dividend. They have massive amounts of energetic young labor and very few sick elderly people to pay for. But that window is closing.
Oh.
They face the unique challenge of needing to get rich before they get old. They have to dramatically boost their productivity to build wealth before their own population pyramids invert.
So if human labor is shrinking and we need these massive productivity loops just to maintain the status quo, economically, we have almost no choice but to start automating high-level human cognition.
We really don't.
Which brings us to our third invisible wall from the Global Challenges Foundation report, technology.
Right. With a shrinking, aging workforce and mounting geopolitical and climate pressures, nations are increasingly turning to machines to make faster, more efficient decisions. And the research highlights exactly where this becomes terrifying.
The militarization of AI.
Yes. We are looking specifically at AI decision support systems, or AIDSS. This isn't hypothetical. It is active on the battlefield today. These systems analyze massive streams of intelligence data and give human commanders concrete recommendations on what targets to strike.
This sounds exactly like the algorithmic flash crashes we see in the stock market. You know, where you have competing trading algorithms reacting to each other in milliseconds, and suddenly the market drops 1,000 points before a human even blinks. Except here, instead of losing money, we're launching missiles.
That is precisely the danger. The report calls it algorithmic speed. AI processes information so fast that adversaries feel pressured to adopt similar systems just to keep up. It compresses the window for human judgment.
It creates an unregulated arms race.
Exactly. In a crisis where every second counts, commanders might just rubber stamp the AI's recommendation rather than waiting for a detailed human analysis. It increases the risk of accidental escalation and miscalculation.
But I always hear this term black box when people talk about AI. But this is software we built, right? If a machine hallucination leads to a war crime, how do you put an algorithm on trial? Why can't a military programmer just open up the hood, look at the code, and see exactly why it chose a target?
Because we aren't talking about traditional computer programming anymore. In older systems, you had a rigid logic tree. If A happens, then do B. You could literally trace the line of code.
Right.
But modern AI, especially the neural networks used in these systems, is made up of billions of mathematical weights and connections. It doesn't follow a programmed list of rules. It recognizes massive invisible patterns across millions of data points.
So it's more like an intuition engine.
That is a brilliant way to put it. It's an intuition engine. When it recommends a strike on a building, there is no single line of code a human can point to and say, here is the reason.
Yeah.
It just outputs a probability based on its training.
Which makes the accountability gap huge.
Huge. Holding it legally or ethically accountable under international humanitarian law is virtually impossible. IHL requires contextual understanding, proportionality, and a human ethical judgment qualities. A mathematical intuition engine simply does not possess. It operates as a black box trained on potentially biased data, which just erodes all these legal and ethical barriers.
And the ultimate risk the report outlines is integrating this intuition engine into nuclear command, control, and communications systems, the NC3.
Yes.
If you have an AI early warning system that misinterprets data, it could trigger a preemptive nuclear strike based on a false alarm. But how do you even regulate this? I know the UN recently saw overwhelming support, like a 165-2 for a resolution on AI in the military, but binding agreements seem totally elusive.
Governance is really struggling to keep up. It is incredibly difficult to regulate because of the dual-use nature of AI.
Dual use meaning civilian and military.
Exactly. Unlike enriching uranium, which requires massive, highly visible facilities, AI is just software. The exact same natural language processing or predictive analytics developed by a civilian tech company to optimize, say, delivery routes can be adapted for military targeting.
Wow.
This is why experts are calling for responsibility by design. We need to build extreme transparency and ethical compliance into the foundation of these systems, because waiting until after a disaster to write the rules is just not an option.
And speaking of not waiting for a disaster, AI isn't just changing how we conduct warfare, it is drastically accelerating biotechnology, which pushes us into our final frontier of risk, the biological tipping point.
The shift from natural biothreats to engineered pandemics.
Yeah. We're looking at the launch of Cambridge University's Engineered Pandemics Risk Management Program, right? SEERASH.
Yes, we are entering an age of dangerous biology. And this Cambridge initiative is a transdisciplinary program focused entirely on the unique risks posed by laboratory-engineered pathogens, which could be far more lethal and targeted than anything nature produces on its own.
See, you and I both lived through a massive natural pandemic recently, and we saw how much global supply chains, healthcare systems, and societies just totally struggled to adapt. So reading about this Cambridge initiative, I couldn't help but think, why the sudden panic about engineered threats? Are we essentially trying to build the smoke detectors for a fire that hasn't happened yet?
We are, but we have to build the smoke detectors now, because AI has fundamentally changed the nature of the fire.
How so?
A decade ago, creating a novel virus required a massive, state-sponsored lab and brilliant virologists. Today, AI models can suggest structural changes to existing viruses to make them more transmissible, and the genetic material can be printed with commercially available equipment.
So the barrier to entry has completely collapsed.
Completely. AI makes synthesizing pathogens uncomfortably close to just writing code.
But what does that actually look like? In a practical sense, what is this Cambridge program doing to build these smoke detectors that we weren't already doing for natural diseases?
Well, they have four main strands of research. They are shifting from reactive healthcare to proactive, systemic surveillance. They are trying to figure out the social determinants and the biological determinants of a man-made threat.
Okay, what's an example of that?
For example, instead of waiting for patients to show up at a hospital with weird symptoms, you model the threats early. You set up real-time genetic sequencing in the wastewater of major international airports.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you monitor the biology of the pathogens, but you also monitor the social behavior, how humans travel, communicate, and spread the threat in those crucial first 48 hours.
So you're monitoring the plumbing of global travel, not just the hospitals.
Exactly. And their fourth strand is this policy innovation challenge. It brings together academia, government, private industry, and civil society to co-create risk management responses. They aren't just locking scientists in a room because a biothreat crosses every possible boundary.
And this is where we really have to synthesize these four massive concepts, because whether we are talking about the physical climate with the AMOC ocean current stalling, or the global economy buckling under youth scarcity, or warfare shifting to AI, or biology being rewritten by these engineered pandemics, the underlying theme is the exact same.
Humanity has pushed past traditional boundaries.
Right. We are in a bottleneck. So how do we navigate that bottleneck? Because none of these things exist in a vacuum. You can't solve the demographic senior gap and feed an aging population if your Earth systems are collapsing and destroying agricultural stability in Northern Europe.
They are completely intertwined. You cannot govern dual-use military AI or engineered pathogens without unprecedented global cooperation.
Yeah.
The solutions require a profound paradigm shift. We have to start treating the Earth as a planetary commons.
To planetary commons, not just isolated national issues.
Right, because economically it all comes back to that treadmill you mentioned. We need massive productivity leaps to counterbalance the demographic drag of an aging world, especially in middle lane and slow lane developing economies.
We have to use AI to augment our shrinking workforces, to help them get rich before they get old.
Yes, but we have to do it responsibly with international confidence-building measures, so we don't accidentally spark a conflict or synthesize a pathogen in the process. We can't rely on the rigid systems of the Holocene or the demographic pyramids of the 20th century. We need extreme transparency and highly flexible adaptation strategies.
You know, if you're listening to this on your commute or at home, all of this can sound a bit like a sci-fi dystopia. It feels really heavy. But what is the practical takeaway for a citizen or a business leader today?
The takeaway is adaptation. The future will look fundamentally different than the past. We're going to have older consumer bases, AI-augmented workplaces, and new planetary boundaries dictating where and how we live.
Yeah.
The organizations, the communities, and the societies that accept this new reality now and build flexible, resilient systems to handle it will be the ones that thrive. The primary risk isn't just the tipping point itself. The true risk is pretending the tipping point hasn't happened.
We have pushed past the point of balance. I want to thank you for guiding us through this stack of intense, eye-opening research today. It is clear that the Anthropocene is testing our resilience on literally every front.
It's complex, for sure, but understanding the mechanisms behind these shifts is the very first step toward managing them.
To wrap up, I want to leave you with a final, lingering question to ponder that really connects the core themes of what we've discussed today. Think about the intersection of our shrinking human population and our rapidly growing AI capabilities.
Right.
As societies physically age and the sheer number of working-age humans dwindles, well, we simply have no choice but to hand over the keys of our economies, our healthcare systems, and even our militaries to autonomous systems just to keep society functioning. Are we engineering our own obsolescence not out of malice, but out of the sheer demographic necessity of an aging world?
It's a huge question.
It's something to think about the next time you lean just a little too far back in your chair. Keep questioning, keep learning, and thank you for taking this deep dive into the sources with us today.